that I set on this app called Concepts. And what I first tried to establish is what the natural ground level contour is that you can do by the contours from plan. You can work out over the distance at what point each height is. So, and then also I'm gonna just, let's take the measure off. That's going to be my grid. Sorry, it's going to be long dash, short dash. This grid I'm gonna make up this drawing as I go along, just to show you how I think through my 1 in 20 section. Get my grid. This would be A, grid B. And if each one is 1 meter, then that means that I'm going to use this line as the top of my finished floor level or concrete level. Let's say finished floor level. And then if each one is a meter, I'm going to use about 3 meters for each floor. Okay, which means I'm going to have to erase this and extend my line. I'm just going to work with 2 floors for now. With that, this one would be, I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to use a thicker line for those things. So my thickest line I'm going to make about, say, a centimeter. And I'm going to make this my thickest line. And then I'm going to make 0.5, 50 moles. I'm going to make my slab concrete. Now, when you cut through a pad foundation, you would never cut through the actual pad itself, because if in plan you've got a plan that does this with a pad there and a pad there, you cut through that section. You want to cut through a section that gives you the volume of your section, but you'll never cut through there. So you'll never see that in section. The other thing is that you will see in elevation. Now, the one thing that we need to remember is when you're drawing a slab, that in this project we are saying that there's also a beam attached to it. And if each smaller block equals 100 moles, I'm going to make the slab about 200 millimeters. It's storage about 255. So from a graphic technical point of view, that's going to be my my slab and my beam. I'm going to do the same for the top, but I'm going to make the top of that my slab. I'm going to make it, say, 200 moles. And in this scenario, I'm going to make my beam an upstand beam because it's a roof garden. Okay, but that doesn't line up quite that well. Somewhere over here, in there. So now I've got my concrete set up. Now, I know for a fact that I'm going to have some sort of column in the background. So I'm going to go to a much thinner pen and draw my column in the background. And that column lines up with the beam. So whatever your design is, you draw your design. I'm just trying to show you graphically what I'm doing. So say for example, let's just erase this. I'm now concerned about the north elevation, and I know for a fact that I'm going to be sitting here. I'm going to be sitting here in an uninterrupted view. I've got a chair. It's got a bit of a bow in it. I've got wheels on my chair. This height is usually about 700, 750. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, correct? And I'm working at that desk. I've got a laptop or a screen that I'm working on. I like to draw all these things because it really helps me to think about what I need to design. Now I've got a problem because the angle that I'm concerned about is of my sun deals with a number of issues. So I'm going to try to block out the amount of glare that comes in and around sort of this area to about that area. And I can do that by creating a Lubid system. Now I can create a Lubid system and I can work this out technically on one of the 3D programs. I can do that, and that could be wide enough for the sun to bounce through it. And the trickiest is that width. If I find and I do a sun study that's not enough, I can start extending this little blade. Now I don't know what that blade is yet. That's a second thought process. I could make this probably out of concrete as well. So because in architecture one likes to do the same materials and use the same materials doing different things, I could perhaps use that and that as the same material. So it's kind of like a desk here and a desk there at the same time. I don't know, it's just the way that our brains think in a sense. Now I've got a piece of glass. Now that glass can either sit right in the middle, and that would make building sense, but I can also put my glass on the end, which means that what does that mean from the side? It means that from a three-dimensional point of view, I'm going to have the same depth if it's in the middle. The line of the glass is going to sit here, but in terms of making something, I can make that glass from a reveal point of view either sit right on that end, which means that it's like a tray. The reverse is that I can make it appear like that, and then it would do that. So this would be the glass, and I can make it flush on this side. But I need that space, or I want that space, for example, and I like the idea of using it from the side. So let's be a bit more daring, and I don't know what this is going to look like in 3D, but what if we pushed it out to that end, and we pushed it out even further, just to pronounce. And when I say pronounce, I'm going to say, instead of putting it in between, I'm going to box it out. Like that. So if this is my column sitting there, I'm going to box it out, push it out. Now, I'm causing lots of problems for myself, but it's a design challenge. But I also know that this top piece here is going to be this piece. So I can use that. So what is that going to look like? Let's delete that. Now I can either push it out to there, which will give me enough space, but I actually just want to push it out to there, to that line. So that from the outside, it just frames it properly, everything's up in line. I can push it out to there. Now, the way my brain is already going to start thinking about this is like, how is this thing going to be held together by this frame? So what I want to do is I want to make my frame, whatever's going to hold this thing, already line up with this concrete shelf. Can you see how it starts to kind of come together as a whole thought process? Now, I'll come back to that. Now my feet is going to sit underneath this. And I can bring my brickwork up to about there, and that should be fine. Um, which means that this would be a sharper contrast to the way that this thing pushed out. So this is pushed in and this is pushed out. Now, do I want it to line up with this? So in my mind, I'm thinking about three-dimensionality of this all the time. The minute I shift a line back or forth, it changes the way that my 3D looks. I already know I'm going to have a double line on top and a double line going back if my window is the same length as this top piece. And I know that this side piece could be made of something else that helps to not only structure frame it, but the question is when this beam comes down at the bottom, what is the ratio between this beam and that plane? Do I want this to be in the same line? And if they do, this is going to be made of concrete. And what is that going to be made of? Because do I want that to look different? No, I don't want it to look different. I want it to actually look the same. So why don't I make this portion either out of concrete or out of a plaster that I plaster this with as well. Let's make it out of concrete, just this portion. And my other motivation for making it out of concrete is to support this piece. So I'm going to make it out of concrete. What does that mean? That means that this can be concrete and that can be concrete. I can make this entire thing out of concrete. If I could make it out of lintels, that's another option, but then I need to support it on the sides over here and over there. So let's see what I've got here. I've got this. So this is now providing this shade. It's also providing an aesthetic protrusion. I'm getting more depth out of that space. I'm getting more focus. And I'm also trying to deal with the aesthetic of this, but also the buildability of it all. So let's leave that for a while. I know for a fact I'm going to have some kind of screed happening in there. That's 30 mils. And if I have another finish, it's usually about 10 to 20 mils on top of that. So I'll just allow that to happen. Now I've got light coming in here. I have to put my glazing in on the top here. So either that glazing can sit here. So how does that look? If I put glazing in here, that means that this sun shading will sit separate from it. It would be silly to put it right in the middle because that means you have to break this piece and that piece. So I have to separate them. Now, I know for a fact that if I put my glass on the outside, it means that the sun is going to get to the glass and then the heat would already enter that space. So I'm going to do the opposite rather. I'm going to, how many lines do I do? Okay, I'm actually undoing them. Okay, I'm going to put my glass on the inside. Okay, and I need to put it on the inside line of this column because I need to fix it on the sides. These blades can then sit short like that. Obviously, I'm now to think about how those blades get supported. So I'm starting to think, what if I made those blades with some kind of frame, like a steel frame? If they're aluminium, it's going to be quite expensive, so that's one option. So I can make that also aluminium. So let's just go aluminium. It means these blades sit in some kind of frame like that. But they're probably going to droop, so I'm going to have some vertical pieces to help support it. But that doesn't have to be a massive piece. In fact, what I can do, if a blade looks like that, I can have a small rod that comes through, and a rod is short enough and strong enough that at the bottom of the blade, what I can do is I can maybe weld a lug to that so that it's not going to look great from the bottom, but maybe there's a way we can make it flush or something. Maybe tack weld it. Anyway, that's very detailed, but what I can do is I can create a real thin rod. What that does is that from a linear point of view, I'll have thinner lines between, as opposed to thicker lines that does that, that breaks it up into little squares. So I want to maybe work on the horizontality of it. Okay, so let's move quickly. Say the back piece here, I've got a bridge coming in. The bridge I'm going to slant slopes slowly, slightly because of water. I've got a handrail. I've got a thick piece of steel. That steel will have to sit on something. So maybe I'm going to stop it short like that. And I'm going to create some sort of steel post that sits on another piece of. Maybe I don't want it to look so thick. Maybe I want it to just look thin like that. You're going to have to see some sort of bolt connection. Now this is the south side, and I'm not going to get a lot of sunlight, direct sunlight in there. So what I also like to do is I like to pick up some of these lines so that in three-dimensional space you see the same line continuing, and then things can happen between those lines. So either I can bring a piece of aluminium glass in there and then align this mullion up with this because that deals with the opening section. I can make this the 2.1 meter line. I can also make it 2.4 so to give it a bit more height. So this would be my door. But perhaps I also want to push something out so that when it rains and I have to open the door. But I want to make it thin so that it doesn't look as clunky. I can also make it square. Doesn't matter. And on this arm, I'm going to pull a tensile rod so I can pull this piece up. But the question is, what is this going to fix to? Because I don't think that a piece of metal, if that's made of metal or aluminium, is going to sit against an aluminium thing like that. I mean, you're going to have to pop rivet through that. So to be a bit more substantial, what I'm going to do is delete this. I'm going to put like a square section in there. And maybe an eye section. That's the height of the concrete, height of the concrete shaft. So that when I weld this onto it, it has a patch fixing like that. So that kind of makes sense. Then I can put my window frame directly on there. That window frame will have another frame there. My door frame would sit there, come all the way down, and I'd have this gap in between. But I can also make it a box. I'll have the back line of my column in there. And remember that you're going to have some sort of threshold that I can see if I make this out of perforated metal, the water would just go straight through, so it would never want to come in. So I've got a balustrade, I'll have a thickness. I'll line it up with the end of this. I'll just do a simple balustrade for the sake of this. You know, the sandstone founded balustrade means that has to be 100 mils, public buildings. What if I took this line all the way through there and actually did something like this, pull that same line through? You'll knock your knee if you come around a corner, but hey, it's design. Okay, that actually looks better without it like that. Maybe put a full plate in there, it will look good. Maybe cut a hole in there, that'll look nice. Now I've got my space. I'm going to stop right here because I want to chop this up into this movie or this video into little bite sizes, and I'll come back part 2.